Hey guys, and welcome back to our lecture series. I'm Ted, your host, and for today's lecture, we will wrap up our lecture on the effects of the Mexican War on the early republic, the effects of the Mexican War. In our previous lecture, we discussed three of the what will really be the four principal proposals for administering the Mexican cession, the territory ceded to the United States by Mexico. And our first proposal came from David Wilmot, Democrat from Pennsylvania. The Wilmot Proviso was essentially the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 for a new generation of Americans. It proposed to ban slavery outright. Now, it passed in the House because there were enough Northern voters in the House to ensure its passage, but it failed in the Senate, where sectional parity assured that the South would be able to fight off this attack on slavery. Now, after Wilmot's proviso failed twice, President Polk wrote to settle the issue for himself, and his proposal was simply to extend the old Missouri Compromise line, the 3630 line, from the western border of Missouri all the way to the Pacific coast. To him, it seemed a very logical and reasonable, thing to do. With this, Polk hoped to simply avoid damaging the nation, having this tension over slavery damage the nation even further. With this, Polk actually hoped to simply use an agreement that everyone had agreed to before, the Missouri Compromise line, that 3630 line, to use that had the deciding factor. A long time ago, we had come to the conclusion, and we're now just simply living with this conclusion. Extremely popular in the South and amongst pro-slavery forces, but unpopular amongst anti-slavery forces and against anti-unionist forces. Not anti, but pro-unionist forces. And we also discussed Lewis Cass and how he rose very high in the eyes of his fellow Democrats, following the announcement of his plan, which was to allow the citizens living in the states to decide for themselves whether they wanted to be slave or free. His plan became known as the political principle of popular sovereignty. And the popular sovereignty or popular sovereignty simply was a backdoor mechanism for slavery to move into territories that not just the Mexican cession territory, but it could also be used to allow slavery to move into territories that had already been closed to slavery, i.e. the remaining Louisiana Purchase country. And as a matter of fact, Cass's popular sovereignty idea, or its proposal, led to a split, led to a fracturing of the Democratic Party. The Democrats were split. A number of Northern Democrats would split and join forces to form the Free Soil Party. And in 1848, with the election coming up, you had the main body of the Democrats backing the remaining Democrats, or should I say the only Democrat, the Democratic Party as a whole, backing Lewis Cass of Michigan, while the splintered Democrats, the Free Soilers, the Free Soil Party, backing former President Martin Van Buren. And that is the scene that we walk into now with the Whigs, who may have suffered the same division that the Democrats have suffered had it not been clear that the Democratic Party's devolution, that they're splintering, with the Whigs' golden opportunity. And rather than risk a sectional breakup, the Whigs nominated Zachary Taylor, the military hero, our chief hero from the Mexican War, the hero of Buena Vista, Monterey, and Palo Alto. Sorry about that. Our great military chieftain, Zachary Taylor. Now, Taylor was a Southerner. He was a slave owner and a highly popular military man who made no known comments on any other competing territorial propositions. In fact, the Whigs adopted no party platform for the campaign. By the end of the summer of 1848, it was clear that Taylor was going to defeat both Cass and Van Buren. Taylor turned out to be not as pliant as the Whigs had assumed. Everyone had thought that Taylor would be like Harrison, a former military man, a former military chieftain who could be placated rather easily and allow the real Whig political honchos, the real Whig political big shots to simply do what they wished. And that was not going to be the case with Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor would prove to be a man with his own ideas, and he would advocate for his own ideas on the settlement of the Mexican Cession and other territories. Now, by the time of Taylor's inauguration in March of 1849, California's population has swelled dramatically, aided by the ongoing gold rush. Sacramento, near the original site of the first discovery of gold, Sacramento's located not far from Sutter's Mill, or should I say Sutter's Mill is located not far from Sacramento, had blossomed into a bustling metropolis. A bill had to be passed to organize both California and New Mexico, organic bills to organize them into territories, and put them on the eventual path towards statehood. Now, Taylor sent his own agents to spur the settlers into organizing new governments. Taylor had fallen into league with some of the Whig Party's most passionate anti-slavery advocates, and Taylor's objective was to have both California and New Mexico become free territories. By December 1849, Taylor's agents had pushed the Californians to apply for admission as a free state, bypassing the territorial phase and congressional authority. So a precedent is being set in which Congress did not or was not able to apply any sort of oversight over a territory's progression, over a prospective state's territorial progression and government. Now, to Southerners, what was happening with California was the Wilmot Proviso come to life. And in the spring of 1850, Southern fire eaters, that is, Southern radicals, who would brook no opposition and would make no compromise on the slavery issue, began calling for an all-slave state convention to discuss what their future could or would be. Taylor faced a challenge from Henry Clay. Henry Clay rose up in the Senate and laid out a plan of 8 resolutions which offered to settle the problem of the Mexican Cession in practical pieces rather than an all-encompassing block piece of legislation. Congress will go ahead and admit California has a free state. The Californians, after all, already had a state constitutional convention and had already adopted a anti-slavery constitution. Now, to block future attempts by territory from bypassing congressional oversight, the New Mexico and Deseret was the original territorial name for what became Utah. Actually, Deseret was a bit larger than the modern state of Utah. It encompassed parts of California, Nevada, basically all of modern-day Utah, parts of Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. A good deal of Arizona, what would become Arizona. But that was Deseret, later Utah. Clay. So Clay's trying to Clay's already dropped any pretense of attempting to be able to wrangle California back into the fold. He's allowed to let California go, and he is now working on organizing New Mexico and Deseret, soon to be Utah, soon to be the Utah territory. Now, for those two territories, they will be allowed to decide for themselves. They will be allowed to organize. In the organic bills for New Mexico and Deseret/Utah, they will be allowed to organize along the lines of popular sovereignty. The people living in the territory will be allowed to decide for themselves if they wanted to be a slave or free state. It left open the possibility that these states might become slave states. To appease Southerners, Clay added a new fugitive slave law. Congress had adopted fugitive slave laws before. The first was adopted by the very first Congresses back in the 1790s. But all those fugitive slave laws have been relatively timid. Hadn't really had a lot of bite to them, and they were never really fully enforced by any president. I don't even think Andrew Jackson fully enforced the slave laws at the federal level, although he certainly did place a lot of ads for runaway slaves of his own, often offering rewards for people who brutalized his property. The current slave laws carry no stiff penalty for those who broke it, other than the slaves. You know, if a free northerner or a anti-slavery southerner aided an escaping slave, then there would be no repercussions, no ramifications for that person. This new law, Clay's new law, gave slave owners new power to not only stop the flow of the human property, but also punish white northerners and white southerners who aided their property in escaping. He then proposed that Congress did not have the authority to regulate, and this is in the last. This is what it said in the last of his proposals. Clay said that Congress did not have the authority to regulate or interfere in any way with the domestic slave trade of the South. Now, Clay's compromise fell short of the critical votes. Pro-slavery senators deemed acceptance of California as a free state as an acceptance of the Wilmot Proviso, while free soilers regarded acceptance of popular sovereignty for New Mexico and Deseret/Utah as surrendering them to slavery. Now, Clay had also mismanaged his presentation of his resolutions. He insisted that all the resolutions be voted on together, not taking into account that while some senators would likely vote for individual resolutions, not all of the senators would be likely to vote for resolutions as a package deal. He came up with these proposals as a response to the sort of harsh block deals that had come up to the Senate before, and he presented them as, you know, sort of like an 8-resolution argument, but he refused to have his resolutions voted on individually. He only wanted them voted on as a block piece, and that was the major downfall of his proposal, of Clay's proposal. It fell short. Nobody was willing to cast a vote that would support something that they were disinclined to or that they believed was not in their best interest. On March 4th, 1850, James Mason of Virginia read an attack on Clay's proposal, and the attack was the last words, the last speech written or dictated, I should say, by Clay's old friend and enemy, Calhoun, John C. Calhoun of South Carolina. And in the speech that attacked Clay's proposal, Mason reiterated Calhoun's old argument of access to the territory for slave owners, calling for an amendment to constitutional amendment to guarantee and protect slave owner rights. The possibility of New Mexico and Deseret or any other becoming a slave state did not satisfy Calhoun. Only the outright opportunity and obligation to become a new slave state if slave owners brought their slave property to the territories, offer satisfaction to Calhoun and his cohorts. They would make no compromise on this. You'd allow them to be slave states. You'd allow the slave owners to do what they want, to bring their slave property wherever they want, or they would simply remain at loggerheads. They were not compromising on this issue. And Clay's argument rested on this. If you deny his insistence, Calhoun and his cohorts rested on this position. If you deny the slave owner the right to take his property wherever he wanted and to establish slavery wherever he wanted to, you made the slave owner a second-class citizen in the Union. Mason concluded Clay's letter by threatening secession. Now, this is the third time. Yes, this is a third threat. The first one coming with the Virginia-Kentucky resolutions. The second one coming with the disenfranchisement, disillusionment with the War of 1812. And the third one is over the blocking of slavery from going west. The blocking of slavery from going west brought the third major national threat of secession from the federal union. This of course was read by John Mason. Mason reading Calhoun's letter to the Senate. Now, in response to this, Senator Daniel Webster, and Daniel Webster was one of the more prominent Whigs in the Senate. Daniel Webster of Massachusetts rose to give what many were considering to be the apt reply of a New England abolitionist. But Webster instead delivered a 3-hour speech denouncing this union and calling on the adoption of Clay's resolution. And Webster would pay dearly for his endorsement of Clay. Clay's resolution was dismantled in debates, piece by piece, and it really disheartened him. Clay would leave the Senate, and he would die soon. His political career in ruins. Webster, Calhoun, and President Tyler would actually all follow him to the grave. And this removed the chief obstacles to a national compromise. President Taylor wanted his solution put into place. Webster, well, I think Webster would have been supportive of really anything, but Webster and Calhoun were out the way. And Calhoun was a major blockage, a major roadblock to national compromise. But with them out the way, the obstacle to national compromise were really removed. And Taylor's successor, Millard Fillmore, quickly proclaimed his support for Clay's proposal. Clay's proposal had been seen as the best proposal for the nation. Now, Stephen Douglas of Illinois rose to a position of leadership in the Senate. He split Clay's package deal into 5 more easily manageable chunks, and he built 5 separate coalitions to support each of the 5 bills that were being developed from Clay's proposal. Fillmore lent his support and encouragement to this bill. It was a nice move of early bipartisan support, in which Douglas, a Democrat, is receiving encouragement and political support from Fillmore, a Whig. Douglas had been targeting his fellow Democrats and building an even stronger base for support. And by mid-September, all 5 bills had been passed by the Senate. The compromise bills averted a showdown on who would control the Western territories. The old Missouri Compromise still stood as the law in the old Louisiana Purchase country, while establishing the new principle of popular sovereignty for organizing the Mexican Cession. California came in. California was actually allowed to dodge both the compromise, both the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850. And entered the Union as a free state. A new fugitive slave law was added, and Congress backed off the issue of the domestic slave trade. Douglas, and really just one swift and beautiful stroke, had become one of the most powerful men in the Senate and a national darling. And this Douglas's proposals, Douglas's 5 separate bills became known as the Great Compromise of 1850. And we will break here, and we'll come back next time to continue the events of the 1850s in the Republic. As always, I'm Ted. Hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about this lecture, and I will see you guys soon.